Hi, this weekend I went to see The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the prequel based on Suzanne Collins' novel to her previous trilogy, which starred Jennifer Lawrence in 4 films based on the books. The concept of The Hunger Games simply is that sometime in the future there has been a devastating war. Society has been rebuilt into the country of Panem, where we have the central capital, uh, inhabited by the rich and pampered, and the 12 districts around it, from which all goods are produced and sourced. People there live in squalor and depression, and every year, one teenage boy and girl from each district is sent to the capital after being chosen randomly and must fight to the death in the Hunger Games, a structure intended to keep them quiet and acquiescent. In the previous 3 novels and 4 films, we saw how Katniss Everdeen, played by Jennifer Lawrence, uh, was forced to compete in the games and ultimately brings down the society. This film is set decades earlier, and we follow the story of young Coriolanus Snow, who, in the later story, but the previous films, is the cruel and ruthless, but still somehow eloquent and almost benign-seeming president of Panem, played by Donald Sutherland. Here he's played by Tom Blyth, an actor who I apparently saw in Benediction a couple of years ago, and Ridley Scott's um, Robin Hood about 10 years ago, but I'd never seen him in anything else. He is a young man from a difficult background, living in the capital, who is hoping to win the major prize to let him go to university. However, instead, he and his graduating class are all assigned as mentors for the new intake of Hunger Games competitors, and he is assigned Lucy Gray Baird, a young woman of apparently Romany stock, with a talent for singing and who he must tutor in the ways of winning over the audience in order to potentially win the games. However, as time goes on, they start to develop a relationship, fall in love, and brings the whole structure of society into question. It's not terrible. It is a significant step down from the previous films. I was surprised by how much I liked the previous films, and I devoured the books. I haven't read this book. I had meant to, and I also had meant to watch the films again, but I hadn't got round to it. So I was coming to this from a position of uncertainty. It's interesting to see how the character of Coriolanus develops from being a relatively idealistic young man into being set on the path that will lead him to be the ruthless dictator of Panem 50 years later, and how his relationship with Lucy Gray feeds into that. And there are some interesting elements in the background of how the games came to be the great spectacle that they later were. In this time, they're simply 24 young people dumped into an arena to fight to the death, rather than the much more complex simulated jungle with force fields and uh, genetically engineered monsters to fight, as we saw in the other stories. Um, the strange thing is that I watched the film 2 days ago, and it's over 2.5 hours long, and it didn't leave a huge impression on me. One thing that really stuck out was that the film did seem to come to an end after about 2/3 of its running time, and then there is a third act, or rather, it feels more like a fourth and fifth, where we follow the story and the characters after the completion of that year's games, and it feels tacked on. It feels like uh, an abbreviated version of a further novel. I can't help feeling that it would have made more sense, perhaps, to split the book in half and adapt the 2 halves independently, one about the games and one about its consequences. That strategy was done for the final book of the original trilogy, Mockingjay. And although the 2 films wound up not terribly long, I thought it actually worked to their benefit and that the result was very strong. Blythe is capable in the lead role. There are more notable names in the supporting parts. Rachel Zegler as Lucy Gray, I thought, was excellent. Um, Peter Dinklage as the inventor of the games is an interestingly slightly warped character, while Viola Davis as the chief game maker is going wildly over the top. Um, and there is a consistency in tone and style with the previous films. Francis Lawrence returns as director. Um, it just felt a little bit not unnecessary. I mean, it's a prequel that it doesn't really it doesn't necessarily illuminate anything we didn't see in the original films. It could have been much more interesting and engaging than I think it was, and it could have been a lot more disciplined in its structure and tone. Um, so it's rather disappointing overall. Not a bad film, I would say, by any means, but far from an essential one.